So chemicals in our food. 1,000 new chemicals are added to our diets every year. And only a fraction of these chemicals have been tested for safety in humans. I mean, I often ask the question, how is it possible that chemicals can be added to food without them being tested safe for human consumption? And when you look at some of those movies, they go into it and how it works that these big food industries basically just bulldoze policy and can push forward anything they want. So there are more than 700 synthetic chemicals in the average person's body. 100,000 man-made chemicals exist in our environment. And this is recent, this is new. If we have to look at the disease rates currently on the planet, and we have to go, when did this start? It's very clear that it started in the last 80, 90 years. So then we go, okay, what's changed? I did work early on as a computer programmer, and I know that if something breaks down on a computer, you have to ask yourself the question, what's changed? Who fiddled with it? So what we do is we look at the food supply and we say, who fiddled with it? What changed? And then it's pretty obvious to see the giant elephant standing in the middle of the room. Chemical farming, chemical agriculture, chemical inputs, chemical toxins of all kinds, since around World War II have been flooding our food supply, unchecked. So we need to be aware of that. One of the things that this book talks about, it's called The 100-Year Lie, it's a great book on this kind of topic, is that the food industry actually purposefully strips out essential nutrients from food. So they'll take out minerals and vitamins from food, and fiber particularly. And the reason for this is that they want you to keep eating more and more and more. Now if you eat food that's got all the nutrients in it, what does that food do to you? It takes away your hunger. You don't feel hungry anymore. Bad for business. You basically want to sell a food that people don't get full on, because then they'll keep buying, they'll keep eating it. So it's very clever business. But obviously the average person doesn't realize this, and they just keep buying and keep eating, and they have this empty hole that never gets filled. I remember as a teenager being in this situation, constantly being hungry, constantly looking for food. And it wasn't until I started getting into raw food and superfoods and real organic food that for the first time in my life I wasn't hungry day to day. I felt satiated. I'm sure some of you have experienced that. Anyone? Yeah, for sure. I think it's possibly one of the most liberating things you can experience, because feeling hungry isn't nice, and we're in a world where there's so much food and yet there's so little to eat. You think, how can people be starving of nutrition when there's so much food around? And that's simply due to poor choices, choosing foods that actually don't give us what we truly need. So carrying on with the chemical thing, since 1950 at least 70,000 new chemical compounds have been invented and dispersed in our environment. And only a fraction of these have been tested for human toxicity. So again, we are the chemical experiment, the soup that's within us. When you basically pick up a box of anything in a supermarket and you read the ingredients list, which is the first place you go to, forget about the front, turn around, ingredients list, they sometimes hide it like under a flap, or you gotta sometimes look. BHT, butylated hydroxytoluene, does that sound like food? Doesn't sound like food. High fructose corn syrup, that stuff is dodgy. Yellow dye number 5, basically all azo dyes. There's red dye number something, and all those dyes are incredibly toxic for health. Propylene glycol alganates. That's like jet fuel. Why is that in food? Common food additive, even as an E number for food, E405. Polysorbate 60, textured vegetable protein and soy protein concentrate, disodium inosinate. These are all MSG names. So since it came around that MSG was bad, companies just use different names for MSG to confuse people. They go, oh, there's no MSG in it, when there is MSG in it, it's just got a different name. So this happens in the food industry, so you've got to kind of educate yourself a little bit. But for me, the simple thing is, if you don't know what an ingredient is, don't buy it. If you read the label and there's one ingredient, you don't know what it is, put it straight back again. Because it's likely not going to be good for you. And that's the simplest thing. I remember I did that many, many years ago when I first got into healthy eating. I was given that challenge of just looking at labels, and if there was something you didn't know what it was, just don't eat it. And that probably rules out about 80 to 90% of what's in most supermarkets. So you kind of end up just having to go to the fruit and veg aisle because at least there the label is like orange, orange. You know? Even that's not always the case because they don't list, you know, all the pesticides that get sprayed on it. So that leaves you with the organic section, which in South Africa is like 4 things. So, you know, it's a bit challenging for supermarket shoppers. That's why you have to go to small independent stores that are actually, you know, supporting organic farmers and getting real food in. Preservatives compose a number of serious health risks like risk of cancer, hyperactivity in children, and reduced heart health. Now the hyperactivity in children is actually well known. It's all over the internet. You know, so you've got to look at preservatives in food, and pretty much anything on a shelf that's going to stay there for more than a few weeks is going to be loaded with preservatives. So again, just check the label. Personal care products. So like this is not what you eat, this is what you put on your skin. So often people think, well, you know, it's your skin, you're safe, it doesn't go into you. Whatever you put on your skin is absorbed into your body as though you were eating it. So if you're going to buy anything you're putting on your skin, it must be edible. That's my rule, because you're basically eating it. So there was a research paper done on this, and they looked at chemicals found in personal care products. 884 of them are toxic, 146 cause tumors, 218 cause reproductive complications, 778 cause acute toxicity, and on and on and on. You know, I mean, you can still get mascara with lead in it. Lead. Can you imagine? Women are putting lead on their bodies. Like, they took lead out of petrol because they know it's bad, but they left it in makeup. It's just incredible. So your awareness must extend beyond food. Basically, anything you put on your skin or put in your body needs to be clean. And there are brands of makeup and there are brands of body care products that are actually clean and actually edible. Now, if the salesperson is telling you that it's edible, you know what you have to do. Ask them to demonstrate. By all means, please eat. And if they flinch, you know, there's a problem. Yeah, I do this. You know, people come and try and sell us stuff in the shop, I'm like, oh, please eat her away. Let's have a look. So pesticides, one more thing. So now, you know, we've taken out all this toxic superfoods with colorants and other additives and chemicals like preservatives and flavorants. So we end up in the fruit and veg aisle. What's actually happening in, you know, food in terms of pesticides? A leading source of pesticide residues in the American diet, and again, we don't have SA stats for this, so I've got to use the American ones. Meat, 55% of pesticide residues come from animal foods, from meat I mean, which is a big portion of what South Africans are eating. You know, the second leading source, dairy at 23%, and then you got vegetables at 6%, fruit at 4%, grains at 1%. So your fruit and vegetables and grains actually accounts for a very small amount. Percentage of US mothers' milk containing dangerous levels of DDT, 99% of milk tested. And DDT has been banned for a very long time. Particularly in the States, DDT is bad. So where's it coming from? Well, they just ship it to Mexico, where they use DDT on all the crops, and they ship the food back into America. As mad as that sounds, that still happens. Pesticide contamination in breast milk of meat-eating mothers compared to pesticide contamination in breast milk of vegetarian mothers, 35 times as high. 35 times, you know, and a baby doesn't even have properly developed organs to detoxify the stuff. Their kidneys and their livers are still busy growing to be able to deal with it. Main reason for sterility and sperm count reduction in US males? Hydrocarbon pesticides, including PCBs, dioxins, and DDTs. 1 ounce of dioxin can kill 1 million people. You know, and they still use the stuff on crops. It's totally insane. And for a lot of people, they have no idea about this stuff. I often test, you know, I mean, I'm in the superfoods business, so I take extreme care that the stuff that we're buying, particularly if it's coming from places like China, is clean of pesticides. I mean, our goji berries, for example, I have triple tested. It's tested in China, it's tested in Europe, it's tested in South Africa to be 100% clean of pesticide residues. And I've tested other brands on the market, and I find anything from 15 to 20 different pesticides. And many of them are banned by Europe. So, you've got to take care with what you're buying, otherwise you're basically poisoning yourself. Other food additives. 70% of all beef and chicken is treated with carbon monoxide gas. It basically makes bad off meat look good, even though it may have spoiled. So meat will normally go grey and then smell and look disgusting. And they know this, so it doesn't have shelf life. So they use the carbon monoxide to make it look pretty, even though it's hiding the growth of pathogens. This is why there are major increased rates of people getting E. coli and salmonella and all sorts of food poisoning from meat items. Sodium nitrite, common ingredient added to processed meats and fish, preserves the color. Basically, once it's in your body, it inhibits oxygen transportation. That's causing cancer. Because as soon as your cells can't carry oxygen, it's pre-cancer. It also increases childhood type 1 diabetes risk. So again, processed meat is one of the most dangerous sources of these chemicals. In 2011, more than 80% of antibiotics produced in America were fed to livestock. That's a staggering number. So, for me, it's not about whether meat is better to eat than vegetables or vegetables better to eat than meat. I just step back to the obviousness of risk factor. Where are your risks at? And today, in our world, eating animal foods is a very, very, very risky business. Recent studies indicate that of all the toxic chemicals residues in the American diet, almost all, that's 95 to 99%, comes from meat, fish, dairy products and eggs. So if you went vegetarian or vegan overnight, potentially you're reducing your toxic exposure load by 95 to 99%, even if you aren't buying organic vegetables. This is why I recommend people move more towards a plant-based diet. I'm not saying everyone needs to become vegan or even vegetarian. What I am saying is having meat 3 times a day, every day of the week, is giving you a big load of poison. So reduce it. In South Africa, we've got the meat-free Mondays. 1 day a week. I'd love to see it swung the other way around, where if you're going to eat meat, have it once a week. Swing it around. So one of the things that I'm really so freaked out about being a father, of a young child, is this study that came out a few years ago. It basically tested for over 400 chemicals in umbilical cord blood. So this is baby's blood, newborn baby's blood. And they found that 287 were detected. And of these chemicals, 180 cause cancer in humans or animals, 217 are toxic to the brain or nervous system, and 208 cause birth defects or abnormal development in animals. Like newborn babies, don't even have the organs, as I've said, to deal with this kind of stuff, or being born with over 287 carcinogenic chemicals. So any new parent or anyone thinking of having children really needs to sort themselves out. Cleanse their bodies, be very careful about the food that they're buying, because basically the baby is going to be the dumping ground for toxicity of the mother. And then onward from that, everything the mother's eating is going straight through into the breast milk, and the baby's getting that. This is why I'm saying, we ain't seen nothing yet. We're on a tipping point of an absolute meltdown in terms of disease rates all over the world. Particularly in South Africa, with these I find it staggering that not more people are falling like flies. Just attests to the incredible strength of this biological organism, that it can handle the amount of poisoning that's currently happening. And people often save the earth, save the planet, we're poisoning the planet. We're poisoning humans far quicker than poisoning the planet. The planet will survive long after humans have been wiped out. It's just, that's the way it's going to be. So we need to sort out the poisoning of ourselves, and by default we then won't be poisoning the planet and our environment, allowing our children to actually have somewhere to live. Other things that are produced in the processing of food are things called advanced glycation end products. They promote the development of various cardiometabolic diseases. So these are the top killers, diabetes, heart disease, you name it. They are basically formed by cooking at high heat. This is one of the reasons I'm a very big proponent of eating food as close to its raw form as possible. Now the temperature that these things mostly form at is above 120 degrees Celsius. So you don't have to be a raw foodist to avoid AGEs. You just need to use water cooking instead of oven or microwave cooking, because water boils at 100 degrees. So steamed veggies, boiled veggies, all safe. As soon as you start oven roasting things at 200 odd degrees Celsius, that's where a lot of the stuff is produced. So when you look into the research, the largest contribution of these AGEs in the diet is meat. So this is cooking meat, braais. I mean, in South Africa, the braai is our national dish. We even have a holiday for it. You know, people are consuming toxic levels of the stuff. The second biggest source is cheese, which is quite interesting because cheese is normally processed raw. But that's not a heat process. It's what's happening is the sugars in the cheese cross-link with the fats and start causing the production of AGEs. So if there are two foods you can look at reducing to reduce your exposure to chemicals, meat and cheese is a pretty good place to start. So what's happening with health then? You know, is there an impact? You know, is it food related? Can we find some correlation? The United States National Research Council states that 35 to 70% of all US cancer deaths are related to diet, and that 60% of the cancer incidents in women are related to diet. That's a radically high number. Completely preventable by changing your diet, up to 70%, and these are official numbers. You know, I think if you start digging into the unofficial side of things, you'll find closer to 90 to 95% of cancers are completely avoidable by just eating real food. And at the moment, I mean, there it is, the lifetime risk for developing cancer is a startling 45% for men and 39% for women. And these stats are a few years old already. I've heard that it's coming up to almost 2/3 of people within the next 5 to 10 years will be diagnosed with cancer. You know, and 100 years, just to be clear, 100 years ago, cancer didn't exist. Hardly known. And, you know, 100 years from that time, suddenly, like, everyone's getting it. Chronic disease estimated to account for almost 3/4 of all deaths by 2020. So chronic diseases are lifestyle diseases. They exist because of lifestyle choices. Lifestyle choices are choosing food with chemicals, choosing food that are processed, not exercising, not drinking clean water. You know, stuff that people actually have control over day to day. So if you just sort your food out, your risk factor radically drops. Radically drops. I mean, this was just a list I found of different cancers which they've linked to preventable with eating different foods, and it's just pretty staggering how easy it is to reduce your risk factor by just changing your diet. I mean, cancer, just to pick on cancer, do we know what causes cancer? Does science know what causes cancer? Anyone? No? I mean, there's billions of dollars every year spent on trying to do cancer research. And some of you may be shocked to know that the cause of cancer was discovered in 1931. Dr. Otto Warburg won the Nobel Peace Prize for discovering what caused cancer. So yourself, how can, like, the cause be known for almost 100 years, and yet we're still not getting anywhere in reducing cancer rates? You know, so the cause of it is very simple. It's caused by weakened cell respiration due to a lack of oxygen at a cellular level. So basically, cells don't have enough oxygen, so they suffocate. But every cell in your body has an imprint to survive. In the same way that you have an imprint to survive. You'll do whatever you can to survive. So when a cell doesn't have enough oxygen to survive, it does this incredibly genius thing, which is it morphs into a cell that can use sugar as its primary fuel rather than oxygen. In cancer speak, this is called, anyone? What the cell is, they say it's? What's the word? I'm asking you because I've forgotten, seriously. Mutated, thank you. I knew somebody knew it. Mutated. So the cancer cell is a mutated natural cell. Now the mutation is a survival instinct. So then all you need to do to let the cell, get back to its original state is to give it oxygen. How do you do that? Breathing helps. It's amazing how people don't breathe deeply anymore. And then secondarily, stop consuming poisons that block the oxygen absorption in the cell. All of these chemicals I've spoken about, one of their main factors is that they prevent cells from being able to carry oxygen. Direct causative to cancer. Cancer thrives in anaerobic and acidic conditions. Anaerobic means there's no oxygen present. Acidic conditions. Acidity in the system is caused by the diet, it's caused by stress, it's caused by chemicals.